Let's go behind the scenes on how I drew this famous scene from Get Out of Daniel Kaluuya. Before we dive in, just want to let you know this is going to be a very long video because this is 16 hours plus worth of content kind of shrunk down into 9 minutes and 35 seconds. So let's get into it. Once the sketch was done, I started off with the hair first. So just with, the black base since he has dark hair. And then I went in painstakingly drawing these tiny little squiggles to mimic the short coily hair of a black person. And then I went back in with a darker color. So I started off with white and then I went back in with a darker color just so it blended better. And then once that was done, I did a little blending on the edges for his taper and then went in again with a lighter color, white, to create the look of his waves on his hair. This took a long time, but I was actually quite happy with the result. There was still some to touch up, but I would go back in later. Then moved on to the face and started adding my shades of gray. Then I did his eyebrows. On this side, I started just drawing in the eyebrows without shading under it first. So I had to go back and then retouch that. But it turned out pretty okay. Again, once I start drawing pieces like this, I just kind of go in roughly. And there's always going to be a lot of editing and refining to do. So I wasn't too worried if it wasn't exactly how it turned out from the picture. Then I went in to do his mouth. He has very full lips, so I felt like that was a little bit easier to draw than usual. And drew his teeth and then went in for the shading. I struggle a little bit still when I do lips in drawing just because of the fine details of lips. It's always very different with every person or every character that you draw. So I was really trying to pay attention to the original drawing, my reference, to try and mimic the shadings and the different lines and highlights of his lips. But where I stopped here, I was like, okay, this is good enough for now. I would probably go back in and touch it up again later. And then I did a little bit of more shading to the face and then worked a little bit on the ear. And this was day one. I think this was about 4 hours worth of work. So I went on to work on the other ear, and this was the last part I did for day one. I tried to do the shading as best as possible. There was a lot of erasing and redoing and lighten up and darken up just to make sure it looked perfectly. And then that was pretty much it. My pencil actually died because I was working so long on it. And that was the end of day one. Day two, I started off with the eyes, just so that it looked more like a person. I had done eyebrows and mouth and hadn't done the eyes yet. So that was what I started with the next day, working out the details. When I look at my reference, the right side of the reference picture, it has more shadows than the left. So I had to be mindful of that. So when I was drawing the left eye, I had to make sure that it wasn't too dark because the right side had to be darker than whatever I drew on the left. Eyes are hard. Eyes are very, very hard to draw, especially I'm just going to call it the bottom eyelid. Yes. And here he had tears and, I didn't know how to, it was just really hard. It was really hard to mimic the look of the water, like resting on his bottom eyelid, but I tried my best. If you guys don't know, I only started drawing about a little over a year ago. So I have no formal training. I don't have a background in formal art and whatever you want to categorize it as. I got an iPad. I had been spending a lot of time watching content like this. A lot of people who drew like hyper realistic art, and I loved it so much. And one day I decided to try, and that's how I started drawing. So yeah, I'm no expert, but I do try my best. So I still have a lot of areas that I struggle in, and each piece, depending on the person, the shadows, and whatever their facial expression is always a challenge for me because it's most likely my first time ever drawing something like that. Just like in this drawing with Daniel Kaluuya, it was my first time to draw a character with tears in their eyes, and that was definitely a challenge. But I think it worked out. So, yeah, that was about day 2. It's already a few hours in. I worked on the eyes and then worked on the nose. And again, every area that I draw for every piece is hard to me because I'm learning as I draw. I'm learning as I do these different pieces. So there's a lot of firsts that are happening with this piece specifically. But I don't give up. I always make sure to keep going. So worked on the nose. So the face is coming together really nicely. It's following, similar expression to the reference picture, which I was very happy with. And then I went in to do some cleanup because I went in just roughly with the light gray color all over the canvas just to have a simple background. So I wanted to clean up a little bit of that before I continued on. And then I moved on to the actual teardrops going down his face. This part wasn't as hard as the the tears that were supposed to be around his bottom eyelid. And it turned out so much better than I was expecting. I was a little bit worried on how this piece would come together, specifically the detail of the tears, which is why I started on like the hair, the ears, mouth, and eyebrows before I even worked on the eyes, just because I was a little bit nervous and just a little bit scared on, would I be able to do it correctly? But as you can see, it actually does look like the character. It looks like the picture. So I was quite happy. And then the next challenge came, and that was drawing the sweater. So for this session, I just did the rough details of the sweater. So simple shading, and then I called it a night. And I would come in the next day to now add in the final details. So this is where I stopped for that night. And then I came back in the next day, finally adding all the detail. I struggle so much with patterns, especially like patterns that you would for clothing patterns. And he had a sweater that actually you could see the threads of the sweater. And I think the whole time I was working on the shading, I was thinking, how am I going to draw in, the sweater threads? Am I going to go in and draw each individual thread one by one? I don't know. That would be very hard. But I just kept on working. I did the zipper and I did the, what's it called? The string for the hoodie, and then worked on the other side. Again, still adding in the simple details of the shadows to make it look like an actual sweater and a t-shirt and not just have the two blend into one piece of clothing. But it was slowly coming together, and I decided to look through my pen collection to see if I could find something that would, I guess, closely match the pattern of a sweater. I tried so many different options, didn't work, and I finally found it was just a pattern of just streaks, and I tried it and it worked. And I just did a little warping of the streaks to make it bend with the sweater, and that was kind of how I got the sweater pattern, which I was again happy with. It's not exactly like the picture, but you would only notice that if you like zoomed in like to the picture. And yeah, went back in now to do the final touches, and that was it. If you made it this far, you are truly amazing. Thank you so much for watching my video. Please like, follow, comment, share, and hopefully I'll see you next time.